Well, it's been a whirlwind and occasionally frustrating start for Representative Bill Posey in his first term in Washington. He's helped oversee the bank bailout as a member of the House Financial Services Committee. He has worked on behalf of Brevard County space industry. He even earned a recent mention in the syndicated comic strip Doonesbury for a bill he introduced on the subject of presidential birth certificates and ability to run for office. We'll ask about that later. Republican Congressman, Posey has gone from serving as a longtime member of the powerful majority in the Florida Senate to a member of the defiant minority in the U.S. House. He represents the House District 15, which includes the southern two-thirds of Brevard County. Bill, the big topic this week has been health care with a town hall meeting in Viera. What is your overall impression of how the debate is going on that issue, and do you have any reforms that you personally favor?
Well, I think any citizen input on any legislation that we have is positive, and the more people that show an interest in the health care reform, probably the better product is going to come out of it. We know almost matter-of-factly that 80% of the American public is satisfied with the health care that they have. 50% of those people think it costs too much and something needs to be done about the cost of it, but 80% are happy with the health care plan that they have. 40,000 people alone in my district have Medicare Advantage in Brevard County and would defend that to the death, I believe. They're so happy with it. The President has said whatever health reforms we pass, those 80% will not be affected. They will be able to keep the health care that they want. End of subject. And I am 100% supportive of the President on that. Now, what should be being addressed, I believe, is the 20% of the people who don't have adequate health care or are not satisfied with the care they have or cannot get it, and I see that the entire focus is not on that, and that's where I would like the focus to be. But I'm open-minded about anything that leaves the 80% of the people who are happy with what they have free to keep that choice.
Here's what I want to know, Bill. I mean, you, before you went to Washington, were involved in the insurance issue here in Florida.
Yeah.
Every year, the Florida Chamber of Commerce goes into Tallahassee looking to knock down workers' comp rates somehow. When hurricane insurance rates were high, realtors marched in the streets. Then we had doctors marching, trying to get medical malpractice rates down. Health insurance benefits for companies, for their employees, have gone up so much, and yet we don't hear the same hue and cry over that. Why do you suppose that is?
Well, because one reason they're up is people are living longer. We have, I think it's 26 MRIs per million, I think is the number, in the United States of America. They have 6, the equivalency of 6 in Canada, and 5 point something in the United Kingdom. Now, I don't think it's because people there are 75% less prone to need an MRI. It's because 75% of the people out of 100% don't get access to an MRI because there just aren't enough, because they're in a rationing program. And when you go to A to Z national health care, there is nothing left but a rationing program. That's what you have to do to make it work. I read Senator Daschle's book, Critical, How We're Going to Solve This Healthcare Crisis. Read it from cover to cover, and he would be driving this train had it not been for some tax problems he had and the inability to get confirmed by the Senate. But he said, they wanted to do this under Carter, but they laid the bill out for so long, everybody that read it long enough said, man, we don't want this, and so they lost support every day. They said, we made, and I'm kind of paraphrasing here, Matt, they said, well, we made the same mistake again under Clinton. We put it out there and gave everybody the opportunity to see it, and they hated it. They weren't smart enough to know that we know better for them than they do what should happen. And now, he said, the next time we want to pass this, we need to ram this stuff through without anybody having a chance to really find stuff in it that they hate. And by golly, just like his book said, that's about what was attempted here. Unfortunately, the process got slowed down because a lot of the people in the majority who they thought would be willing suckers on this deal said, not so fast, we don't like this, we don't like that, we don't like the other. And so this thing had to be vetted in a committee, unlike the stimulus that didn't go through a committee. And so they made some changes to it, and they rejected some other changes, but they came out with a product that I guess the Speaker liked, but couldn't get a majority to vote for. before we took the August recesses, which where we are now. So when we go back, they'll be piling on again to see if they can reach a consensus on this. The real thing is like you and I talked about before off screen, we don't really know what the final product is that will get voted on. The stimulus became available at 11:30 the night before it was passed, 1,178 pages. Not one member of Congress read it. And they admit it. Not one member of Congress read the stimulus bill that passed. Cap and Trade came out, and I think you pointed this out in a recent article. It was a 1,300-page bill, more or less. At 3:30 a.m., they came out with a 350-page amendment to that. And when you take a bill like this and you're required to have amendments on every little page, you're trying to stick these in and see how they fit in, how they make sense. I mean, it's not just a matter of reading 350 pages to understand the amendment. So the reality is, I hope we'll have 72 hours at least to look at the final product before we vote on it. I have just made a pledge, anything that they do not allow me to vote. Now, if it's a 10-page bill, I don't need 72 hours really, but they're going to throw bills like this out. I'm going to vote no, and I think everybody should. I mean, I don't think you or anybody in this building or anybody in the viewing audience, if I said, look, this is good for you, put your name on here personally and commit 650,000 people that you represent to this. No, you can't read it now, Matt. No, you can't read it. Just sign it. And that's unconscionable. You know, that cannot, it should not be happening. And I hope in some small way to make sure that it doesn't happen in the future.
I should share with our viewers that this is the House Bill 3200, and this is one of the health reform bills that is under discussion at this moment. Something else could certainly pop up, and we hear about new things being put on and off the table every day. Let's change topics a little bit, Bill. I recently wrote that some $101 million in stimulus money had begun to arrive in Brevard County. Not all the work has begun so far, but so far it looks like the money is going in the biggest piece to work on I-95 in Palm Bay. We were also seeing some work done out at Port Canaveral. We're seeing work done, construction work done at Patrick Air Force Base, and a bunch of other stuff. When Congresswoman Suzanne Cosmas was in for an interview, she was very happy to point out a lot of those things. You have probably a different take on the stimulus bill. Why don't you fill us in?
Well, the stimulus bill was meant to stimulate the economy, obviously. And when I think stimulus, and you think stimulus, and most of the people that will watch this show think stimulus, they think heart defibrillators. You know, let's make this economy go. Well, it's what's supposed to weigh out, they say, ultimately at $1.2 trillion. Only 10% of that money gets spent this year. Now, upon the passage of the stimulus, they sold this as, look, unemployment's approaching 8%. If we do not pass this stimulus bill, it will go past 8%. If we pass this stimulus bill, it will never exceed 8%. Yeah, that was the sales pitch.
And we're now at what, about 10.5%?
Well, we're 9.5% nationally,
okay,
and climbing. And I asked Timothy Geithner, the Secretary of the Treasury, I said, you know, what's the difference between what we thought was going to happen and what was going to happen? And he takes off. He said, no, we all know it has to get worse before it gets better. And I said, well, you know, with all due respect, this is your diagram that said it would go before 8 and go down, when in fact it's continued to skyrocket up. He said, well, it's right on course. I said, no, it's not on course. This is your diagram. You said it would not go over above 8. It's 9.5, you know, heading for 10. So, you know, we spent all that money, which is not free money, by the way. It needs to be paid back. You don't have to pay it back, and I don't. We'll be dead and gone. This is charged up on our children and our grandchildren's credit cards. It will have to be paid back. This is not manna from heaven that God's going to rain down on the people of Brevard County to help pave their roads and support their infrastructure. This is stuff we're borrowing from your children, my grandchildren, and your children's children when the time comes to pay this money back. It's not free, and there's going to be interest on it. And you know, right now, I guess China's even balking at bailing us out until such time as our kids and grandkids start paying this money back. So, you know, I feel like we have tried to artificially hold up this economy, and you can't fool Mother Nature. I mean, you know, when you've been around 60 years, you see that the economy goes through cycles, and I don't care what you do, internationally or domestically, these are natural economic cycles, just like the climate change, you know, in 1 year. I mean, you go through 4 seasons, some aren't as severe as others or whatever. And I think by printing more money that we do not have, and flooding the market with it, trying to make it look like we're not in a recession. We are prolonging the pain here. We are just kind of holding this person that can't walk up a little bit, and eventually they're going to have to fall down. There's going to have to be a market leveling out, on prices for real estate, for stock, for everything else. And I don't think we have seen that yet. A lot of the experts don't think we have seen that yet. I hope and pray we've seen a peak at unemployment, but we're laying off people this week in Brevard County, next week in Brevard County, and the following week in Brevard County. And if something doesn't change in the space front, massive people in the future. So, did the $1 trillion make any difference? Or would it have been better to let NetJear take its course, let General Motors go bankrupt, let them go into receivership and fight their way back out of it, or to let the taxpayers all over this country go in there and artificially bail them out, subsidize competition for poor Fords over here trying to sell cars without a subsidy? How fair is that? One manufacturer gets a government subsidy, the other one doesn't, and they're supposed to compete. This is a free enterprise system. So there's a lot of fundamental differences I have with what happened with that stimulus money.
Talk about space for a minute. The Augustine Commission has come out with several different recommendations that seem like they put the Space Coast in a tough position in terms of continuing to fly the space shuttle or launching rockets onto the moon and Mars. What's your take on the situation now and efforts to try to improve things in Washington?
Well, you summarized it pretty good, Matt. None of the scenarios are what we had hoped. I mean, the Augustine Commission clearly is trying to deal within the focus of what has been thrown down as a budget now, rather than the hopes and dreams of continued space dominance for the future. I mean, there's some things you just can't do on the cheap, and you can't maintain space dominance for half as much as it should cost. There's some that say, well, if we go to this route, we're going to have to get rid of the space station. If we keep the space station, we're going to have to not be able to do this. There's some triangulation in the recommendations that, as you've read and you've published, that make it painful, I think, no matter which scenario we choose to go on. And I see nothing reduced that will reduce the gap, which, with all due respect, the President said he would do when he was here, and you've quoted him on
right.
that. I don't see that happening. I see the gap getting longer, and I don't even like to say that out loud. We have the space bug here. We know the benefits of space. We know our cell phones, our laptops, our GPS, our weather satellites, our Velcro. We know the 6,000 trickle-down benefits that came from it, but the rest of the country doesn't. And so you need a president, somebody in the president's line, like John Kennedy did, that inspired a whole nation with his goal to put man on the moon and return him safely within a decade, and we did it. And I'm looking for that same kind of leadership from President Obama. I want to see him make a commitment. It may not be as big a portion of the GDP as Kennedy's was, because that was a big bite-off. And Kennedy said, listen, I'm doing this. Later, the papers that were recently what do you call it, declassified?
Right.
Not so much that, I'm a space pioneer, but I want to show the world that the free enterprise system will beat the heck out of that socialist system any day of the year. And that's what it was about. It was to show who had the will and the brains and the enthusiasm and the motivation to do that first. And of course we did, and we started out behind, if you remember, after Sputnik and all that stuff. And so hats off to President Kennedy for that. And hopefully we'll be saluting President Barack Obama for the very same thing in the not too distant future. I mean, that's my fervent hope and prayer.
Let's digress for a minute. I want to ask you about a bill that you introduced that I actually thought made some sense on its face. A fairly short bill, but it's been labeled the birther bill. Describe where that idea came from, what you're trying to accomplish with that.
Well, as you know, Matt, and you wrote it in your column, I did the election reform in this state in 2000. That was my first assignment as a state senator, as chairman of the Ethics and Elections Committee, fixed the 2000 elections. And I came up with precinct-based optical scanners, almost foolproof, provisional ballots if there's a controversy, early voting, vote by mail, absentee, no problem. And just about every other state has copied what I did by now. And so I'm in the tune all the time. If there's a way to make this better, how do you make it better? Well, we've got this acrimony going on. The president doesn't have a right to be president. wasn't native born or natural born or whatever. And so, it doesn't matter at this point. In the future, we can fix that. We can say in the future, you prove your eligibility with a birth certificate. It proves your age. There's only 3 conditions to be president. American citizen, at least 14 years, native born, and be 35 years old. And it's fixed just like that. I didn't have a press conference, didn't do a press conference. This is simple. I mean, this is pure vanilla. This is how you just stop problems from happening. And when everybody's calling me a tin hat and a wing nut, like some of you people right in this building, I've never heard them call the New York Times, the Washington Post, tin hats or wing nuts. And a year ago, they were demanding this legislation because they said this was an issue with Barry Goldwater. He was born before it was a state in Arizona. George Romney, this was an issue about his eligibility. Vice President Kernus under Herbert Hoover, he wasn't born in the continental United States. It was an issue. It was an issue for John McCain, and Barack Obama himself thought so much about it. He was one of 3 co-sponsors in the state Senate, or in the U.S. Senate, that sponsored legislation declaring that they thought McCain should be eligible because his parents were citizens and he was born in a territory. It was a territory of the United States. So it only makes common sense that someday some Congress needs to implement the Constitution. Now, almost every other part of the Constitution I can read has been implemented. Women's suffrage, it says women have a right to vote. But if there's not laws that say how they vote, women could not vote. There's laws about discriminating against people, or Constitution is against discrimination. But if you don't have a law to parrot that, it's never implemented. So it goes with every provision of the Constitution. There's implementing laws. There was never any implementing laws for this. That's what needed to happen. So what happens now? The other party, the day after I filed that, put out a nationwide request for funding to take me out. Said it was anti-President Obama, which it was not. I mean, I voted for a resolution that said he was born in Hawaii, and I mean, that shouldn't even be an argument, but they did it as a fundraiser. It was a low blow, and oftentimes in Washington, D.C., as you heard before, no good deed goes unpunished. And so it's been an effort to make me look like a lunatic. And the more they do it, I guess the more I like it, since it polls incredibly well. So, it's like some other things I've been criticized for. I mean, the more they bash me, the more it rings true with the voters. So I don't really mind it. I just mind people being misled.
Do you personally believe that there's any reason to suspect that he's not a national?
I don't have any reason to. I'm trying to stop this controversy. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. If half this newspaper thinks something about you that would cause a problem with the business here, and it could be resolved in the future, never to have this divide in your operation again, don't you think it would be common sense to do that?
Sounds
It's
fair.
just common sense, but like you said, just the timing of it, and it was maligned by one particular person, and then one reporter called me and made some accusations that were off base, and he said, I'm going to write this, and I said, well, you would be a liar if you wrote that. And he said, I resent that. And I said, I resent what you called me 2 minutes ago. And it went downhill from there. And so his paper did not publish the article, but he eat it out to everybody else, who then started taking half-truths that he wrote and incorporating it in their stories. And then the bloggers got online, and I refuse to read the blogs on this stuff. They're so ugly. I mean, people calling for my death in some parts of this country. I mean, it's just as insane. Oberman named me the worst person in the world.
Congratulations.
Yes, that's what everybody says. And I mean, I'm worse than a pedophile, and then Colbert used the F word, talking about my grandmother, talking about what it took to create a monster like me. She must have bleeped. They bleeped out the second half of the word on the air with an alligator. And these are the people, the gentle, kinder people, the tolerant people. There was an article in the paper that said, I'm whining. I'm not whining about it. It's a matter of fact. It's just a stark difference from the way they like to talk about tolerance. You should talk about tolerance for any of their causes, but if you have a cause that deserves the benefit of the doubt, there shouldn't be any tolerance for that one. So it's, kind of insightful to see how it works.
Well, I hate to leave it on a frustrating note, Bill. Thank you for coming in
Hey,
and joining us. We're out
always.
of time. We'll see you right here next Wednesday on WBCC and FloridaData.com. I'm Matt Reed. Thanks for joining us.